Did you know that a sense of malaise or burnout can actually be a sign of loneliness? I'm According to the US Surgeon General, about 1 in 2 adults experience considerable levels of loneliness. But you don't have to identify as lonely for this show to be for you. We're hosting an expert on loneliness to help you understand the dynamics of loneliness and, more importantly, what to do about it.
I am Dr. Shabnam Daskar. I'm a functional medicine doctor and a certified tiny habits coach. I teach people how to improve their focus, get rid of brain fog, and reduce their risk of dementia. And Andrea and I are really excited to have Amy with us today as a guest.
It's so true. And I'm Andrea Spyros. I'm a behavior design consultant and professional speaker, and I work with organizations to increase engagement, resilience, and well being. And today we are hosting Amy Vest. She is a leading expert on loneliness. She's done behavioral architecture for notable organizations like Harvard School of Public Health, American Heart Association, and related to this episode, Sunny, a new company designed to increase public health in the social well-being space. More importantly, she has studied and designed behavioral interventions that can help anyone feel less lonely and more connected in ways that are meaningful for them. Welcome, Amy. So, first, let's define loneliness. Can you help us with that?
Yes, I sure can. And I'm really glad to be here with you all and glad for us to talk about this topic of loneliness. And as you mentioned, it's something that a lot of people may feel as just kind of like a general malaise or even almost just discouragement with their social lives or with the feeling of why don't I have actual friends? But the way research defines loneliness is that it is a deficit in the number of relationships you wish you had and the number that you actually have. So when it's defined like that, it really can vary across the spectrum according to how you were raised, what you think is normal, and what you actually want for your life, and almost what some would call a social set point, what you feel is the right amount of social that doesn't drain you and somewhat energizes you for going forward. Now that's different from isolation, which is truly a person doesn't have contact and they don't have people in their lives. So it's not about the deficit, but it's about almost, being in a little like a space that is your own that does not connect with others. And then solitude, a lot of times, is what we would consider to be the state of being alone that a person does want. And balancing our togetherness and our solitude is a task for all of us, psychologically and developmentally too. So that's how I am thinking about it these days.
And I think that's a super helpful way for you, the listener, to start to think about loneliness. I think a lot of people out there think of it as this feeling that may or may not end, and that's not necessarily empowering. And the way you've described it is basically a mismatch oftentimes between I want more connection and I don't have either people or time or some other as much connection. And so if you're out there listening, think about in those terms, and we're going to get practical on what we can do. Now, a lot of people do think about loneliness as this feeling that just kind of is going to come and go, but there are some things that actually impact loneliness, some life circumstances, things like that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, definitely. So, to you, listener, I would love for you to just take a moment and think about what is the social time in your life when you felt most connected and most comfortable in your social life. And think about the amount of activity, think about the quality and depth of your relationships that you had, think about the stability and your sense of safety that you had. All of those are factors in whether or not you feel lonely. And you can become lonely even just because you're so professional that you get so many people asking you to do so many things that you end up finding yourself in like a workspace where that's almost all you're doing. But as you think about your personal arc of connectedness and loneliness, think about now the times that you have felt most lonely and most disconnected. The likelihood is that it was after a life transition, maybe after you moved to another location. Um, After the pandemic, a lot of us just lost a lot of our socializing habits and structures that were bringing us together. Think about, changing jobs, anything that causes you to need to completely change your social environment is a likely time for being lonely. And another surprise, a lot of people think that your lonely times are going to be when you are old. And a lot of times, good news for some of us who might be aging, it is not necessarily true. A lot of people are actually quite happy with their social relationships as they get advanced in age. It is not an elderly problem. And in fact, Gen Z is one of our most lonely groups. But if you think about it in terms of transition and what I would call social set point, there is a that is maybe to be expected. There are shifts in how we develop our self-image now in the digital age as to what we would have done before then. So a lot is in flux in terms of where do I fit? How many friends should I have? How many friends do other people seem to have? And then my transitions, whether I'm in high school, going to college, going to adulthood and the workplace, it is a time with a lot of transition. So in some ways that's to be expected. But we do see normal, predictable, and expected phases of loneliness. And it is helpful to think of them as a phase and that there are preventative things that you can do when you know one is upcoming. And then there are also things you can do to help yourself get through it and accept how you're feeling at the time.
That's fantastic. And we are going to discuss some of those things you can do later in this episode, because we always want to leave you with really practical things. And I think that's a helpful uh, framework to think of it as a phase, that it's not something that is happening to you. So Shabnam, why are we talking about loneliness? I mean, sure, it feels uncomfortable. Nobody likes to feel lonely, but what are the health impacts?
Yeah, this is actually fairly recent information that we've realized loneliness can be sometimes much worse than even smoking. Like, all of us know smoking is bad for our health, but loneliness has been shown to be a bigger driver of dementia risk, increased heart disease risk, mood disorders, all the chronic diseases that we are dealing with. Loneliness is one of the major factors. And Amy, you brought up something very important, that younger people are more lonely than ever before. We kind of assume that older people, because they may have, become widowed, or they have separated, or they are living by themselves because their adult children have moved away, so they're lonely. And that is not always true. A lot of younger people are lonely today. And the other important thing I think for us to remember is sometimes we forget that people don't realize they are lonely. They may live by themselves, but all people who live by themselves are not necessarily lonely. So this is also important to understand. I was talking to somebody a few days ago, and I come originally from India. And India, multifamily homes, and these are fairly common. So she is saying, "Oh, I don't think there is much of a problem." I said, "No, just because someone is living with a lot of other people doesn't mean they are not lonely, because maybe nobody talks to them." So many different aspects of this. But yeah, the health consequences is something very important. The US Surgeon General brought this up fairly recently, and all over the world, there are a lot of things that are being tried from a public health perspective. I'm sure, Amy, you can tell us as well.
Yes, definitely. I mean, there have been a lot of attempted interventions, and loneliness is something that, of course, we know is subjective. And there are interventions that have worked. I think one thing that helps people is to think about what it is that contributes to their own feelings of loneliness. Now, again, as we've talked on or touched on, a lot of people don't, quote, identify as lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And I would even put myself in that category. At honestly, before I started working on this project, and I had worked on my own business for quite a number of years, had really trained myself to be disciplined, to be responsive to my clients. Um, I went through, some challenging changes in my family, and found myself in a place of what would I do for fun? I don't even know anymore, because I've worked so hard to ensure that my business is stable and that stabilizes my family. And I didn't want to think of myself as lonely, because I'm an outgoing person. I like people very much. And even the work that I do is very dedicated to people's well-being. So in my mind, it was kind of a mismatch. But I had several moments that came up when I just was thinking to myself, I wish I could call a friend, and I'm not quite sure who to call. That it was a wake-up call, a really uncomfortable feeling. And right before that moment is when I was invited to start working on this project. And I was a little shy, because I'd done a lot of other public health interventions and programs. And I had to ask myself, am I the right person to do this? But I did come at it with a sense of openness and a sense of being willing to explore. We do know that interventions like, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at something that we'll talk about a little later. But for example, when you text your friend, it may not be that you're just texting a friend to say hi. The more you text somebody, the more you interact with them, even starting small, the more you are opening the door to dialogue. And the more you're opening the door to dialogue, the more likely it is that you're going to get together in person. And the more you get together in person, the more you feel in sync with these people, the more you can build trust with these people. So it is actually a progression. And of course, there are a number of interventions, like putting yourself in places where people are, taking small steps each day to reconnect, but also it is identifying what it is that is missing for you. So sometimes that is, a sense of trust and safety. Sometimes it is a sense of shared resources. Someone that I could ask to, for example, lend a hand if I needed a babysitter. That's the shared resource of time. Someone that I could say, could you spot me $100 before payday? For a lot of people, that is part of what contributes to their sense of social safety net, and someone who would say, I've got your back. We do see some differences in socioeconomic status and educational status in terms of how willing people are to ask for and give help. But we do know that there's like emotional transactions that are really important to their sense of loneliness versus not loneliness. And there are practical and resource-centered steps, actions, behaviors that contribute to a person's sense of loneliness or social connectedness and well-being.
So, how would someone identify those factors? Because you've obviously looked into it, so you can identify trust and safety. I need trust and safety, or I need someone to spot me $100. That's something that's missing. How would they know? Because they're not thinking about it in this nuanced fashion, what they are missing. If they're experiencing loneliness as a malaise or depression, or just that esoteric, like, I don't know what I don't know, and I need something. And I think after I had my first child, and who was very colicky, um, all I could say was, I'm not getting my needs met. And I had no idea what my needs were. And part of it was loneliness, and part of it was a whole host of other things. Um, So how would someone identify what's missing for them?
Great question. So first of all, we know that we all need a sense of closeness. We need people we could call like companions in our lives, and we need a sense of community. So those are kind of the big buckets. We ran a test of like 1,000 people recently. So it was just a survey. And I'm not going to go out and say like this is definitive research, but I will say when given these, I'm going to tell you these 5 factors. Like we had people split out. Okay, let's think about your romantic partner or spouse, significant other, whoever you might consider to be in a close relationship, or they could say, I don't have one. Now let's look at your close friends, family, casual friends, like kind of splitting up the different social circles that are active in your lives. And listener, if you hear this and you're thinking, oh, I don't have any, okay, that's okay too. But ask yourself a little bit of why you don't have it. Every relationship is built on small actions of connecting and responding. So for most of us, we are not reaching out enough and we are not responding well enough. But okay, so we ask people about these groups that they would say were active and just say, asking them to feel more satisfied with this group if they rank their satisfaction as low. I would need more. I'm going to tell you these 5 things. Either more variety and quantity, more reliable support, more time together or attention, more trust, care, and respect. So that's an emotional part, and more of a sense of belonging and purpose, which is also more of an emotional response. And people found that they could, once they separated it into groups, so they couldn't look at their whole network as, the 700 people that I know their names of and say what they needed more of. But if you said, okay, let's think about your close friends, and now think about this short list. Are these needs getting met, or is there something you need more of? With these 5 factors, everybody said it was really easy for them to know what they were either missing or what they had in those groups. So I thought that was really interesting. We've been working on some little inventory things that people can take to help them see where their needs are and where they might benefit from having some more clarity, and where they might want to focus on strengthening or evolving or even starting over if that's what they need to do.
Nice. And I think that is such a helpful framework for people. So action steps here, listeners. Number one, think about if you have a significant other or your household family unit, whoever you're immediately with, roommates, and then think of your close friends near and far. And then once you've identified those, think about how you can feel more satisfied with that group with the 5 factors that Amy outlined. And then you'll have a much clearer picture of some action steps that you might need to take for decreasing your loneliness and having a little bit more meaning. And even if that does mean starting over, but there's always a place you can start, which is the good news, right?
That's right. Yep, you can start wherever you are. That is really good news. And research shows across the board that it doesn't matter what age you are, doesn't matter if you're 85 years old, if you want to be more social, and if you will take actions to be more social, you can be more social and you can get the benefits from it.
Which is excellent news. I often said that my father, who was in his 80s when he passed, he had a much better, more active social life than I did.
Mm,
He had friends he would go to lunch with every Wednesday. He had friends from high school that he would see on a regular basis. He talked to my godmother after her husband died every Tuesday at 10:30
wow.
without fail. He had a bakery that he went to every 2 weeks to support, and he'd get some baked goods. Would send people texts on their birthdays, their anniversaries, things like that. And it kept him remarkably connected and really engaged into, he was 89. So,
Mhm.
but that was something that was natural for him to do. But those are actually actions that you're kind of talking about. And you've articulated really clearly, like it's really these small steps that people take. And you said sometimes we're not reaching out enough and we're not responding enough. And so, can you talk a little bit about what that might look like, especially in light of sometimes you can reach out to people and they're also not responding. So it can feel like, I've reached out 3, 4 times and I got no answer or not a satisfying answer. Talk a little bit
Mhm.
about how we can address those.
Yes. And for a moment before I do, I want to also circle back to something you said about the actions that your dad was taking. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of believing that they're not as socially connected because there's some like magical charisma, um, depth, or intensity of bonding that is what's missing. And that is really a myth. It really is more about putting yourself out there, being reliable, showing up for people, being willing to smile, being willing to hear them. It's those little bitty things that put us in the situations where people eventually, depending on what's going on in their lives, they might trust us with something more vulnerable. And so, but you have to be present in order to have those moments that people imagine are the moments. What really is the moments are showing up, being someplace regularly, being someone that people can depend on just to say hi, even a lot of those little things.
Yeah.
So yeah, so as we think about initiating and responding, and then possibly about being ghosted,
Yeah.
uh, it happens that we're in the golden age of ghosting, as some have said. And I think we have to recognize, as much as we want friends, there are other people who also want friends, and there are other people who also want to be more social. And there are also other people who are dejected, who are struggling, who are feeling private. We're in kind of an age where people think that asking for help of other people is not as high a status of a thing to do. Now, I think I think that's going to change, but being willing to take initiative and to keep taking initiative and to think of it as planting seeds and we're going to see what grows. That's the way I think of it. And that has been a real transition for me. I've tried to, in the past, I tried to anticipate how people were going to feel, how they were going to receive this text, and the likelihood that they wanted to be friends, like I was imagining the biggest and best possible outcome instead of thinking it like, I like this person. I'm going to let them know. I'm going to send them a little initiative. If I'm traveling to someplace, hey, I'm going to be in your town. I would so love it if we had a few minutes to go for a walk or have a coffee or something. I'd love to see you in person. But I don't have my self-esteem riding on that because I know that people are just in different places in life. People are more and less um, invested in their own social well-being. And so I put it out there. Let's say I put it out there to 100 people and I have 40 people who are as in as I am. That's a win. I'm going to keep putting it out there to 100 people. and I'm going to keep replying to the 40 people who are interacting with me. Now, 100 might be a complete exaggeration or terrifying for some people who would say, I'll put it out there to 4 and
Yeah.
hope for 1. And that is totally okay. I so happen to have a lot of people in my life, but even for me, who someone who has lived a very, very maybe overly connected life, anyone can find themselves in a lonely place where they feel like they are either missing closeness or companionship, hangout kind of people, or a sense of community. And so looking for what it is that you can see that you need, and then planting some seeds in those areas, and taking an open mind and a self-congratulatory mind. This is something good that I'm doing for myself. I am improving and cultivating my social world. And in doing so, it allows other people to also cultivate their social world. And let's see what happens and who's with me, who wants to do this.
I think that experimental mindset and not an all or nothing mindset is really helpful. And I think, just my personal opinion, when people are lonely, you can feel a little more fragile, and rejection can kind of rear its head.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
taking this, what I hear you saying is taking the steps and doing the actions, the smaller actions are what are going to lead to the bigger thing that you want. And just congratulating
Exactly.
yourself for taking those actions, whether it's just texting for people that you know, even just making a list of the people that you would want to reach out to. Who are the
Yeah.
people I would like to reach out to, and making that list right now? Here's whoever pops into mind. Or I think you've shared this with me, Amy. Take a look at your texts.
Yeah,
Like
Yes.
I was
right
just going to
now.
say that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. Take a look at your texts, and those are the people that you have reached out to recently, probably in your closer inner circle. And then think
Mhm.
about, this is what I did one day after I think you shared that with me, is I realized like, oh, I haven't really connected with some other people who I imagine, were I used to do a lot more with. So
Right.
then I went to my contacts and I thought, oh, these are some people that I could reach out to text or say, hey, what's happening with you? And I think having
Mhm.
some um, meaningful things to say. I mean, you don't have to say, hey, what's profound going on. It could be like, hey, how are you
Exactly.
doing? We haven't
Yeah.
connected in a while, right?
Yes.
Andrea, there's something I remember you telling me about your father doing this, where he used to either call or message those people who had maybe a cancer survivorship
Yeah.
anniversary, or they finished their chemotherapy, or
Yeah.
I think that, just tell us about that. That I found was so like
My,
really great.
my dad, and I wish I had I I don't have the calendar that he had. He he was so about connecting and community that he would keep track of all the important dates for people, their birthdays. In Greek, in we're Greek, so a name day is an important thing, their anniversaries, if their spouse or if their children graduated from someplace there for college, he would do. And if they survived chemotherapy or were cancer free for a number of years, all these milestones in people's lives. And then as technology, he used to call them, but then he stayed on top of technology and he would text them. He even send gifts and things and have little conversations with people. Hey, today it's 5 years since you are in remission. I'm so glad you're here with with us, and let's get together. Or even they would just have a text conversation. And after he passed, I saw in his phone all these little conversations he'd have with people, and many of those people were newer, but a lot of the people he had known for a long time. And it's easy to take people for granted, but he had built up the skill set. It was a natural skill set for him to find all these points of connection with people. I have a friend who texts a GIF every holiday. She's far away, but every holiday whether even if it's some random esoteric holiday, she will text me. And I think that's her prompt to say, it's a holiday. I'm going to reach out to a wider net of people. And then it's up to me to respond. I can just like her text, or I can take it as a bid for attention, which is like, hey, what's been going on? And then also I could take it to the next level, which is I can just text or reach out to her in between holidays. Like I don't have to wait for her to do that. So those
Totally.
are some actions people can take that are real practical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that reminds me of two things. So in research, I keep hearing people say, well, I want to reach out, but what if they reply and I don't know what to say?
Interesting.
I know it's really interesting. And I just would love to be able to help people relieve themselves of a burden there and just to recognize that attention is a lot of times what people want. And it just because you texted someone doesn't mean that you are locked into giving them attention for as long as they want it or need it. But you can still, even if you have to drop off or or even keep it short, like, hey, I just had a few minutes, but was so happy to think of you and to hear, that you're hanging in there, that you're making it okay. And, I hope you carry these good thoughts with you today. Like you can still leave things positively, even if you don't have a lot of time. Um, and one story too that I think really illustrates this process so great. And Andy, like what you said about your dad, my dad was similar. He had been in military. He reached out to people on Facebook after he passed away. I found, lots of conversations where he would welcome people back, let them know he's there if they served a term of service, if they, ever need to just talk to someone who's been through it before. And he'd sponsored a lot of kids to get their international student visa. And so he would reach out, like just saying things like, I always knew you were going to be a superstar, even if there was nothing in particular that they had specifically done, just giving them that support. So it was really heartwarming to see. But thinking of like how people can get in touch with people. So with Sunny, the group that we're working on some support resources for people, I was making a little video and I had an actor with me. And I told the actor, we're going to do these actual things and I hope you'll do them with your actual friends. And she said, well, will you show me? So I said, all right. I said, here's my phone. Look, I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom. I'm going to see who is there and who is there that that I would like to reconnect with. And lo and behold, I had a cousin who was way down at the bottom. I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't talked to him in 4 years. Oh, has it been that long? So I just sent him a little message, even though I was actually making this video. Daryl, if you're listening, all the good feels to you. But I sent him a message just saying, I ran across a picture of us the other day and it brought back a lot of happy memories. I hope you're doing really well, which of course is true. And then he ended up texting back, just saying right away, saying, wow, it's so good to hear from you. Yes, it's been a long time, but I also have lots of good memories together. I'm so glad to hear from you. Well, then that's basically the end. But then about 3 days later, he said, so I so happened to have a layover in Dallas. I would love to see you. And, if I was afraid of social or uncertain, I might have thought, this has become real. But I'm just in a good place. And like, whatever it is, yes, as much as I can say yes to social. So then he says, actually, I'm going to bring my wife. Could we both come? And then actually it morphed into, how about if we have a cookout at your house? Oh, is it okay if I invite a couple more cousins? Now, to some people, this might feel scary, but I was very welcome for all of it. I was really happy to do it. And then he said, now, isn't it your dad's birthday coming up? I wonder if we could get him there for to celebrate him too. This was all him, all his initiative. He was making these calls and stuff. We just provided the backyard. And it was during the pandemic. So he invited my dad. And it still was all just, casual. Yes, great. That'd be great. So mom and dad came. And then 3 weeks later, my dad passed away unexpectedly. But because we had taken the little bitty steps of just being in connection with each other and getting together and seeing and communicating and giving that support that just happens by you just so happen to be in the same space with each other and share the memories, it very much changed the way I experienced support from my family on after my dad's passing. And that I think that little story right there illustrates something so important. And that is one, that these little moments do matter. The little moments are what bring us together. And bringing us together is what gives us a sense of social safety and a sense of a life well lived, really. And that's one of the big findings of the Harvard study of adult development, which is one of the longest running studies we have had in the United States. And it is that quality relationships is the number one predictor of life satisfaction.
Yeah.
And even just knowing that, even during the pandemic, which was a time of greater loneliness, we had a backyard, we had an event. He was able to have that affirmation that people wanted to come and be with him. And he didn't know he was sick even at that time. But I was just so glad that we had put some priority on social connectedness at that time. And it is something we all need. And algorithms can give us a lot. They can match us to information that we want. We can have parasocial relationships all day long. But our life quality is very much influenced by being around people and making space for people and finding ways to be patient with humanity, because it's messy sometimes, but we all need it, and we all do want it when we find that we allow for that in our lives. And it's really allowing space for love and being loved.
It's such a beautiful story and I mean, it didn't start, I think what I really take away, and I hope listeners are taking away from this, is that started as a text to just connect. And
Yes,
it really evolved organically
it did.
into something that was kind of beyond expectations of connectedness. And I personally, this is not studied. I always think that there's, like you talk about um, algorithms and all, like that's one type of connection, messaging, texting, all the way up to in person. There's this kind of continuum or constellation of connection. And we don't always need the highest level of connection, but we probably want it available to us. And it can start from the smaller things in life, like just that little text. And I think there's also the value, what I heard you saying earlier, is even in just saying hi, right? On your morning walk in your neighborhood, who is there that you see at the same time saying hi,
Yes.
right? That's a start. I have a friend who takes a walk in her neighborhood, and she started by saying hi, and now she knows everybody, all the dogs, carries treats for them, and has even been invited over to people's houses, right? Even the person at the coffee shop or the store that you frequent, just to say hi and have those interchanges can be buoying to our sense of not being lonely, to being less alone and having a community.
Right. That's right. And I think, if I had been trying to seek out some kind of artificial closeness or something, it wouldn't have happened in the same way as just being open and interested and responsive in the moment to whatever comes up, and somewhat even to the needs that arise. I try to, as I'm working on like writing content for Sunny and the platform, I try to make myself do all the behaviors. There was one day that it was talking about talking to someone that you don't know. And I'm like, well, I really think I just want to see how it feels to me and see what emotional friction I feel doing this. What inside me is saying, don't do it. But my husband had a crew here helping to work on our yard. And I was like, all right, you know what? I just need to go with whoever's the closest person here. And I ended up talking to a guy who was out there, and I'm like, okay, he doesn't speak English. Well, I'm going to practice my Spanish and just ask him how bad is it? And turns out this was like his second day after being legally allowed to immigrate here. And we became really good friends. Every friendship starts with some kind of hello, and it's even okay if it starts with an awkward hello. And I think we can try to, engineer it and think of what we need and what we want and really try to go for this goal-directed thing. But when it comes to reducing loneliness, the more we're willing to be open to a process and responsive and initiate with just kindness and curiosity and goodwill toward other people, the more we are likely to have the opportunities to respond in times when people really need it.
Yeah, and for people to respond to us in times when we really need it
Exactly.
too, right?
Exactly.
The more you have out there, the more that there's the possibility that some can come back to you too. And I was
Mhm.
reading something about there's things that go around about, how do you break up with a friend, and that's been trending. And I read something that just make more friends, right? You don't have to break up with that friend, just make more friends,
Exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
so,
Yes.
yeah, so share with us some of the actions that people, we've talked about texting, we've talked about saying hi. What are some other actions that people can take to start to play around with this, with the attitude of experimentation, to get the ball moving in the right direction so that they can have less loneliness, more social connectedness? And then a preview as we come to a close. Then I want you to talk about the Sunny app, where you are with that, and maybe if it's ready for people to um, uh, take part in it or get on a waiting list. I'd love for you to share that.
Sure. Yes. So I try to divide it into kind of buckets of actions, if you will. So, like for a while, I was keeping a little checklist for myself. Like, have I made sure to just say hi to people? Think, like if you think of them, go ahead and send them a message, tell them hi. Have I found people around me to encourage that for whatever reason, either because they're having a difficult time, and if you need to start super, super small, you can look on social media. Most likely there will be people who are posting about how they're feeling. And if they're feeling down, maybe that is your call to offer some encouragement. I try to, think about who actually needs support. Now, a lot of these are a little bit altruistic. That's one of the best ways to make friends, is to show up for someone who already needs friends. But you don't have to do it that way. You can start with, planning something fun, even if it's a hey, we're gonna have a little get together, after our networking meeting, if you want to come, have coffee and talk with a little small group of us. Have fun. Like if you're traveling for work, reach out and see if your friend wants to just go for a walk with you. Little things like that, which can open the door to being together. But it's okay if it starts digital. It's okay if it starts really small. It's okay if it is you offering to help somebody, even if it's someone in need. And that if you feel that the kinds of friendships that you want, like aspirationally, are not the ones that you have, I really encourage you to see, to explore a little bit more deeply on what you have and consider some ways you could reach out and, let's say, find a group. Whether it's a group that you would be willing to join for like knitting or stamping or crafting, or even a recovery group if that's what you want and need, or maybe it's a group of walkers, someone who's nearby, and not just to visit one and say, these are all the reasons this one was no good, but to find 3 groups that you would be willing to visit and then visit them for 3 times. That is a little bit of a harder to do thing. You might feel that there's some friction in it, but putting yourself into a social situation, if what you want is more social in your life, those are the things you need to do. If what you want is more closeness, more, more of a sense of super tight interpersonal, you need to be willing to do the things that are not so super tight and interpersonal, but also get better at expressing your appreciation, expressing that you value the other person, and helping yourself to take little actions to be a little more vulnerable about how you feel. So, for example, you might say something like, well, I've had a bit of a discouraging week, but I'm really glad to be here with you. And it's okay if we don't focus on that. I'm just letting you know that's the reality of how I've been feeling. But I'm glad to be here with you. What's going on with you? So taking those steps that will allow you to show up as the real you gives permission to other people, if they just want to be there more to support you, or if they want to also share where they are. Those are some good ways to move your closeness along
And
to a deeper level.
it seems too that there's no it stops people from the concept that we have to entertain one another, right? By
Yes,
sharing something like that, it takes you out of the we have to entertain one another and put on a persona, that we can actually be our real selves and acknowledge that we have real feelings, that we're not all sunshine, roses, lollipops, unicorns, and rainbows all the time. And when we stop performing, we start being present and real. Right.
very true.
And I
Talk
think also to be, sorry, so also to be comfortable being awkward for a little while, like maybe the other person doesn't respond. It's okay. I mean, not take it personally. I know sometimes it's hard for some people. Oh, I sent her 5 messages and she didn't respond. Maybe she's not feeling like it, no?
100%. I think being okay with the awkward and telling yourself, I am working to build a more connected world or a more connected life. And, you know, I mean, we just don't know. It
Yeah.
could be that they're in a really devastating situation. It could be that they don't feel like they can talk about it, but um,
They might feel awkward too about responding, right?
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And we don't have to make all these, like what you were referring to, break up with a friend. It doesn't have to be like, hey, if you don't want me to text you, I won't.
Right.
We can we can make it about planting seeds and just sending out our good thoughts, well wishes, And sometimes even, even connecting with someone in a way that asks for their opinion or some help. I have someone that I had been friends with a long time ago who I knew was an extreme expert in like Texas medical care for people who did not have resources. And I was trying to help someone. And I didn't want to make it the first thing that I said was reach out and, hey, can I access your brain trust to apply it to this person I'm trying to help? Um, but I thought I really do like him and I really do care about him and still want to be friends with him. So I'm just going to call him and say hi. And then I'm going to keep trying to help this other person. But if we have a warm conversation, there might be a place where I would say, and later sometime if you have time, I might see if you can point me in a good direction to get help for blank and blank. Like it was the need for his input that prompted me, but then I stepped back and thought, the sentiment is what I really want to connect with him on because I like him regardless of whether or not he wants to participate in this project type of a thing. And so inviting people to help you in a way that respects whether or not they want to, and in a way that primarily builds on the sentiment that you have for them is another good way to reconnect with people that you like and also people that contribute to a sense of social safety net for you, and to be willing to also respond when people ask things like that of you.
Yeah, and the response part, right, is not only are you doing your part, we've talked a lot about outreach because that's when, but also now respond. See those
Yes.
texts, see those messages, see those hellos as a big
Mm-hmm.
attention, as a someone saying, I'd like to connect with you. The
Yes.
phone call instead of just something that's happening in the middle of your meeting. It's something
Right.
that you can address later and say, oh, that was a bid for attention. Someone wants to reach out to
Yes.
me. I'm going to do my part by responding, right?
100%. It is like your gateway to more connection with that person. 100%. If they didn't want some attention from you, they wouldn't have reached out to you with a bid.
Yeah.
And so even if you can't respond now, like, oh my gosh, I'm at the movies. I'm so glad to hear from you though. Let's talk later. Happy face, happy face, happy face. That
Yeah.
gets attention, and it can be an uplift instead of oh my gosh, will these people stop and leave me alone? Allow yourself to see it as that is someone's bid for attention. Those are one of my open doors to a socially connected life.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, say more about Sunny and if people can connect to it. And then we'll put a lot of what Amy has shared in the show notes, some of the resources that she has and things like that. So always check the show notes.
Yeah. So Sunny is, um, we have a philanthropist who started Sunny. It is from the Barnes Family Foundation. And he wanted to help people get more connected and feel more of a sense of community and belonging around them. And we looked at several different ways. I've been contributing to Sunny for about 4 years now, and we are looking to develop a project that helps people prompt themselves to take action socially and helps them think about what is it that they need and want, what are some little goals, pairs them with some prompts, although they could take their own, like it might say, text a friend. It might say, just, recall someone that you're grateful for. And then it might say something like, is this, would you feel comfortable expressing this to them if you can? So it really helps bring your social opportunities to mind and helps you think of it in some of the ways that I've been describing, where you approach it with more openness, you think of it in terms of planting seeds, and you think about what actions can you do, what initiative can you take, and how can you help yourself be patient and respond to where the seeds are blooming into some good opportunities for you. So we launched our alpha. So we are we're studying, giving some people a chance to tell us how they are and are not experiencing it. It helps you check in with your social energy and helps you match your social energy as well. Knowing that some of us have a lot of social energy because we have a big social life, and we might have a little social energy, but even if you only have a little, you can still do something good with what you have.
Excellent. Amy, I want to thank you for being our guest today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. If you're listening, please do all the things like rate, share, subscribe, and check out the show notes. And as always, you can find all the podcasts at drkarmd.com/podcast. That's drkarmd.com/podcast. Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.